And it's really great to be here at UniCon 2022. I don't know what I did to have the pleasure to stand between you all and your weekend, but we're going to try and get through this together and talk a little bit about OT security, which is certainly a passion of mine, something that I love, and I've got this really wonderful team that I get to work with, and we take care of this our little section of the electric grid. So today we're going to be talking about adversary emulation in OT environments. And so for those of you that aren't aware, OT stands for operational technology. There's really two sides of the house as we see it. There's the IT side, which is your traditional information technology, the stuff that drives this information economy that many of us work and operate in. However, in terms of the processes that actually drive the information economy, that's where OT resides. So when you think about OT, you think electric plants, transmission distribution systems, water, wastewater facilities and distribution capabilities, manufacturing, oil and gas. Those are the kinds of things that we're talking about in OT. So you won't see a lot of OT in a data center. You have to go out into the field or go out to a power plant or go into a wastewater facility in order to actually experience and engage with OT systems. So real quick about me, my name is Ian Anderson. I have the pleasure of managing enterprise security operations at Oklahoma Gas and Electric, or OG Energy Corp. In my role, we're responsible for all cyber, physical, cloud, IP, OT, things that happen from a day-to-day perspective. And of course, we have this amazing team that helps us take care of our 900,000 plus customers all across the state of Oklahoma and into areas of Arkansas. We use the term enterprise very particularly because we are a cloud/IT/OT shop. So anyone working in our teams will have to be able to pivot from working in an Azure environment or an AWS environment to traditional IT stuff all the way down to OT. So it's a really exciting place to be. It's very challenging, but again, we're helping keep the lights on, so it feels pretty good to be a defender. Some takeaways I want everyone to walk out of this presentation with is why adversary emulation in OT matters. I think that's the number one thing that we're going to attempt to try and talk about today. And then through our discussions, we're going to attempt to kind of line out what a potential path to success of getting adversary emulation onboarded into your organization looks like if you have OT dreams. Here's some things this talk is not. It's not going to be very technical. So I'm a manager type. I forgot the technical side a long time ago, and I think I actually saw a member of my team on here somewhere who is certainly going to be holding me to task if I speak too far out of line. But this is going to be about how to have some conversations, why it may matter, why your organization may want to take this effort on, and it's not going to be a blueprint for you because every organization is going to be different. The path to adversary emulation in your OT environment is going to be different, and honestly, that's kind of one of the reasons OT is so awesome because everyone's journey is their own. So. High level, our agenda. Why adversary emulation OT? So we're going to talk a quick bit about the OT security space, reference the knowledge gap, which I think we've touched on throughout today's sessions. What does that path to getting emulation in OT look like? And then we're going to dip our toes into the pond of how far down do we go in the OT stack, or down the rabbit hole, if you will. All right. Why adversary emulation in OT? So we're all aware of things that are going on out in Eastern Europe. We're all aware of all the different things related to critical infrastructure and critical infrastructure protection, CISA, ICS CERT. There's all these organizations that are really dedicating their time to the OT and critical infrastructure problem. And just security in general has gotten so substantial anymore. And so pretty much every time I talk about what the security space in general, but specifically OT, I have to bring up an eye chart like this. So this is actually from a year ago when I presented at B-Sides Boston. But look at the number of options that are out there now for the defender. Look at all the different things that as a manager or as a asset owner or as an analyst, I have to be aware of all these different types of solutions, because somewhere in here, I'm going to pick my kickball team and put together the squad that is going to help me, prevent malicious activity from the adversary. And we are now seeing this tremendous growth in the ICS or /OT space. So it used to be there's only really a couple of these companies that even knew what the heck OT meant. And so we isolate this to say, hey, like the OT security space in general is growing, but we also have to be aware of the IT space. And to just go back and reference that OT security space, there's and I forget the citation here, but it's estimated there's going to be around $23.5 billion worth of value in the OT security space specifically by 2026. That's an incredible amount of growth for an area of networks that most people don't even know exist and certainly don't really understand or comprehend how they operate. So we've got this big, giant environment there. We got a whole lot of money. We've got tons and tons of different products and things like that. We've got an environment that not a lot of people understand. Wow, that seems like a challenge, right? Well, we're going to crank it up a notch by acknowledging the knowledge gap, right? And so, there's a quote from this thing called the Industrial Control Systems Cyber Kill Chain that we will reference here deeper a little bit later. But there's a quote in here by Asante and Lee that, like, I have formed part of my career around. By understanding the inherent advantages of a well-architected ICS network and by understanding adversary attack campaigns against ICS, security personnel can see how defense is doable, right? The biggest part of that quote is defense is doable. And it tells you exactly what you need. You need to understand the inherent advantages. So we now know what we need out of our people, and we know the challenges of the vendor space. We know the challenges of the type of environment. Well, how do we get there? How do we fill that aspect of the knowledge gap? So in enterprise security or IT security, frankly, there's not a lot of us. The number's growing. But we see this we see this referenced all the time, that there's this big talent gap. There's a talent shortage, right? There's going to be there's going to be a million person deficit when it comes to the security personnel needed. Now, I'll push back on that. I don't know how truly factual that one is, but I think that I think we are running short on security with people with security talent, right? Well, OT is a little bit. OT is even more rare, right? So, I try to use a little unicorn pun here because, we're at CICE conference, but security people are rare. OT security people are even more rare. Like, they are the unicorns, because for effective OT security people, you need someone with a lot of the IT or enterprise security disciplines. And then you need the kind of the OT side. So you got to understand how these processes work, how the process control networks work. Physics majors actually make great OT security people, right? It's not typically just the traditional IT person that can come in and just become an OT security person. There's a lot of field work, a lot of experience. To fill the knowledge gap, right? We need to capitalize on, the uniqueness of the control environment. And what do we mean by that? Every OT environment is different. So at OG&E, we've got a handful of different power plants. Every single one is different, right? Every single OT environment is different. When I worked in water, every water treatment plant was different. And so they form their own kind of kingdoms, and their uniqueness actually becomes a defensible structure for you as a defender. Now, there's been a whole lot of write-ups. There's a lot of interest in OT security, but the reality is a lot of people don't understand what an OT attack actually looks like in their tools. You get an alert, you get an event. Like, how do you really ascertain? How do you know the difference between malicious and normal operations? Are you prepared to do things like, do normal triage like you do in the IT environment? And so this is really one of the first areas where adversary emulation and OT starts to help you is adversary emulation gives you an opportunity to start to bridge this talent gap. Adversary emulation allows you to evaluate the vendor, help you understand your protocol, your operation stack, all the different tools and how they work together. Do you have gaps? Do you have, are you overly redundant in areas? And it's also now providing your SOC analysts, your OT security people, just really, the folks that work for you that have an interest in protecting these environments, you give them real actionable information, and you are literally creating that home field advantage for the defenders. So OT environments, given their uniqueness, provides a competitive advantage for you in terms of saving off the attacker. Why aren't we taking advantage of that? Why are we not creating that home field advantage? And then when you take the next step from there and you start to pair counter threat cyber threat intelligence with purple team exercises, which is now something that Scythe is really active in, you can start to build out these campaigns that help you evaluate tools, that help you understand what an actual OT attack looks like, and a realistic one, right? The thing that we like about pairing CPI with purple team exercises is we're not in the business of stunt hacks. We have way too much going on, just like the rest of you all do, to be worried about like these kind of weak one-offs. Yes, they exist, and yes, they're important to a point, but man, let's go hit the stuff that's actually out there. Let's go make sure that we're capable of taking care of the risk that we are literally detecting every single day, right? So to continue on with the knowledge gap and kind of move back into your OT, developing your OT security workforce, is talent development. And I'm gonna really try not to beat a dead horse here, but we have to seek to develop internal talent. So if you are an OT person, or if you're responsible at some level for OT security, you have to start going and recruiting internally. You have to start developing those INC techs and those operators and the people across your organization that know where the proverbial bodies are buried. Lift them up, create security contacts. Everyone can, people can be in security without being in security. It's just an empowerment thing. Some of our most effective security personnel are people that aren't even in our team. They're out there, literally on the frontier, taking care of systems and watching our back. And they're some of our best allies. And we're going to talk a little bit here in a moment about building relationships. So, like I said, train and develop that home field advantage, again, all through adversary emulation. By launching these attacks, you can see what an attack looks like. You can develop people, you can create that home field advantage. All right. I feel like we made the case for adversary emulation, and I know we're kind of light on time. So if I sprinted through that, I'm sorry. I'm available. If people have questions, you can go and fire them off. But let's talk a little bit about how to get to adversary emulation, because I think that's probably the more challenging piece of all of this. If you've ever heard me give a talk about OT security before, you probably got beat upside the head with talks about alignment and stakeholder engagement and partnership and things like that. And this talk is going to be no different, because this is really where the value happens. Because you're going to ask a plant manager, you're going to ask an INC tech, you're going to ask an operations person, hey, I'm going to launch fake malware on your network. And they're going to say, you want to do what? Remember, these are folks that have experiences of having their stuff knocked down for no real reason. Like an Nmap scan gone wrong could crater a PLC. So they have, they have experiences with IT causing problems. They also tie things like, I remember 7 years ago where email wasn't available for 3 hours, and I don't want that to happen to my network. And so the history, right? The longevity, the length of their memory is incredible, because these folks all operate on 5, 10, 20-year cycles with technology. And they remember everything that happened to them, because for them, outages are bad. And if IT is creating outages, that reduces trust. So anytime you're going to do anything touching their environment, it's going to be a trust challenge. So if you're interested in adversary emulation, the path to adversary emulation in OT should have started years ago. And really, any sort of OT security should have started years ago. So we were asked, with the things that are going on, with the war in Ukraine, there's a lot of questions about like, should we, deploy anything? Like, where are we at? And I saw organizations attempt to try and spin up a rapid OT security program. And frankly, at this point, it's too late, because OT security is going to be far more than any sort of blinking box. It's truly that partnership, because there's just so much of the uniqueness of these environments that you cannot depend upon a tool to account for. So, and I bring up these puppy dog donuts because if you follow my Twitter account, I talk about donuts being the secret weapon of OT security. So if you ever go out to see your operators, your plant folks, bring them a couple of boxes of donuts and throw a couple of goofy ones in there. And so one of the things that we do is we'll have either a pink heart or a puppy dog donut, and the person that takes the puppy dog donut gets a prize. So we'll have like a Yeti cup or something. So, so when we go out there, you kind of watch who's taking these donuts, and it's always the last guy that like begrudgingly takes the puppy dog donut. Little does he know he's about to win a cool prize. So, in terms of aligning stakeholders with our adversary emulation efforts, this is something we are using Scythe to help us do, right? So we use the Scythe Purple Team engagement, the reports, that process to help make sure that leaders understand the value that is being driven here, right? So it's not just like a launch a bunch of malware, pull logs out of our tools and see, what we can do, what we can improve. This is really about, are we having this kind of guide, from, the edge of our network all the way down to our most critical, crown jewels. And when you really get into going through that full Purple Team engagement, at your crown jewels, involving your OT, INC techs, your plant managers, those types of folks in these discussions, so they can see what happened after the boom. They can start to gain some experience around what an OT attack looks like in their environment. So earlier I mentioned the ICS Quilt Chain. This is it here on the left side of your screen. Notice there's two stages. There's stage one, which is basically the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain. And for that, I think I owe Lockheed Martin $5. Then you have stage two. So stage two is the ICS specific. And you'll notice it's a little bit the same, but a little bit different, because what the adversary is looking to do is frankly different in an ICS environment, right? It is, anyone can kind of just turn off these, turn off a PLC, right? So there's denial of service capabilities, but the really effective, the really impactful ICS attacks require the development and implementation of code to affect the process itself. That's where that damage comes from. Yeah. Okay. So when we work down the ICS Quilt Chain, let's pair it with this other thing on the right, which is called the Purdue model. So the Purdue model is a basic way to look at the different levels related to an OT environment. So it starts down at the bottom at level 0, and those are your sensors and gauges and transducers and things like that. And it just kind of moves its way all the way up, through the OT DMZ, which is, this kind of, the DMZ between your enterprise network and your OT network, and all the way to the cloud. So this is a very basic representation of what a lot of environments look like. And using like a tool like Scythe to do for adversary emulation, you can very easily go and try all sorts of interesting types of attacks that cross zones and do reconnaissance and do all sorts of really, really neat things. And we can do that as much as we want, and it's really great. So we can iteratively test and tune our security stack to make sure we're getting the most value and most capability out of our environment. But if we're going to try and do ICS level work, it's going to take a whole lot more interaction. So in this case, we're going to assume a compromise of our IT environment, and the C2 is communicating with, a workstation, and the workstation ends up talking to some sort of like patch management or a web services item here in the OTDMZ. And maybe that thing talks to a domain controller in our level 3. And then it's going to talk to this engineering workstation, which then can talk to our PLC, or programmable logic controller. So this programmable logic controller, that's where the magic happens. And so that's where, if we are looking here on the left side to the stage 2, the delivering, install, and execution is going to happen at this level, right? Develop and test will typically happen off the network, but but the delivery, install, and execution will certainly happen here at level 1. There's really going to be 2 types of attacks here, right? There's a access, right? There's an access level attack where that kind of stops here at level 2, meaning the adversary is attempting to gain access to these points and moving through the Purdue model, working themselves closer towards the process or the control level. And then there's an impact attack. And so if you are impacting, that's what it sounds like. It is you're negatively impacting, or impacting at some level the environment. I've been thinking about this one a lot. I really don't know how a plant manager would let us run an attack designed to perform an impact in their OT environment, right? Which is just fine, because these are production networks, and we want to be conscious of it. So, but access attacks actually make a lot of sense, and I think that is probably something that you could do, given you have the right amount of relationship. So you want to do an impactful attack, though, right? We want to test some of these destructive capabilities, because we want to see what kind of information we can pull out so we can build better defenses. Well, let's build a lab. So credit to Tom Van Norman, I know, and Bryson, the founders of the ICS Village. This is one of those things that I dream of, having a lab like this, just because it's so cool. And if you have never had a chance to go and interact and engage with the ICS Village, I could not recommend it highly enough. The people that, all the volunteers and stuff are fantastic, and it is a great way to see what OT is all about. But in this case, we have a lab environment now, and for the most part, it kind of resembles one of our OT environments. I mean, it certainly may use some of the same software, some of the same kind of infrastructure or servers and services. It may all just be bundled up in a virtual host or something like that. But we can then work through this and actually create those impactful alerts, and then we can try and gather that telemetry from the various tools that we have deployed throughout this Purdue model, pull that information out, and then see what of these experiences can we take and apply them to our different control system environments as they exist throughout our service territory. The reality is, though, most of us are not going to be able to afford something like an ICS Village for our own organization. And so, there are less expensive, I don't want to say cheap, but less expensive options for getting your hands on PLCs or, different trainers and things like that. So if you have an organization that has OT in your environment, there are like these kind of cool training kits that we have certainly used to go and beat up on and write some nasty stuff that does things like kind of shut things down. And it's also a great way to communicate the importance of OT security by going and blowing these things up every once in a while, which I guess is just another way of doing this stuff. Okay, but building a lab, there's a couple of things, a couple of big takeaways that you can get out of that. So it's going to have to be a multi-team project, and it's going to be fun, and you're going to make some friends, because this is in order to do it right, you're going to have to partner with your subject matter experts and your stakeholders. If you do, they're going to get into it, because this is the kind of stuff they love. And if you're respectful and work with them, then it's really going to create some partnerships, and you're going to learn a whole lot about your network and stuff that you never knew about. And it's just going to make you better as a defender. So, and then lastly, you'll make friends, right? Who can use more friends? All right. So in closing, how far down the rabbit hole? So a few slides ago, we introduced this idea of the Purdue model. Again, starting at the very bottom with level 0, sensors and, actuators and all sorts of stuff, right? And then all the way up through a DMZ into your enterprise network, then kind of beyond in the cloud, however you want to kind of slice that top part up. But, how far should PPEs go? So we kind of talked a little bit about impact attacks. We talked a little bit about access attacks. There's probably room for both, but where should you start? Well, for most of us, it's going to be start at the obvious weak spots. And the obvious weak spots are going to be the stuff that's exposed to your OT environment or is exposed to the human element. So you'll notice there in level 2, there are some, workstations. There's an engineering workstation that has direct access to PLCs. Maybe that's a great place to start some sort of PPE where you can assume a compromise or just assume a contractor or a employee has brought in a bad USB stick. You also have to really focus on what the threat intel says. And so if the threat intel out there for ICS and OT malware says, hey, we're seeing abuse of HMIs happening. We're seeing PLCs talking to each other. We're, doing enumeration activity. We're seeing, people reading and writing to registers and coils via Modbus that they're not supposed to. Those are the things that you should begin with, right? So when you're talking with Scythe or, and planning a PPE, go make sure you hit up, your threat intel partner and specifically Scythe and say, what are these OT level attacks that you all are seeing out there? Because that will help you drive a far more productive PTE for the OT space. And then lastly, is adversary emulation required at level 1 or lower, right? So remember, level 1 is where really the PLCs live, and level 0 we've talked about a couple of times. From my perspective, I think adversary emulation is absolutely required at level 1. There is risk though in that. So if it's an access level attack, or you're just doing proof of concept where if I can touch a PLC and read information off of it, then I know I can go do stuff. If you're writing to a PLC, I think that's important to be able to detect, but that one's going to be really difficult to get by your OT stakeholders. So I think level 1 is probably where it stops. Personally, I think there's so much fruit to harvest off that tree before you get to level 0 and really start hitting these sensors and actuators and things like that. However, that could change, because if the threat intel says, no, that's where we're seeing attacks emanate from. So supply chain attacks, bad firmware, things like that. If it gets to that point, then yeah, I think level 0 is 100% in play. So in conclusion, that's pretty much what I got. But if you are interested in more, Mr. Bort and I are going to be presenting something along these lines at the SANS ICS Summit in June, which is another online conference. So if you want to come learn a little bit more and see some more stuff that Scythe is doing in the OT space, come and check out our talk. So it's Friday afternoon. I've done a lot of talking, but are there any questions?
Ian, fantastic. And I didn't even pay you to highlight my alma mater so many times. So that in and of itself has made my Friday afternoon. And I looked it up. Professor Williams, who he was still there. He had retired a little bit after I graduated, and no one dared walk by his office. You better have had a good reason or be a PhD student to go past that sacred domain. So great stuff. There is one question, and I know we only got a minute, but well, we're right at an hour, but I'm going to give it to you. If you got a quick answer, great. If not, we can answer it. Grayson says, hey, in your experience, what are the best ways to break down the IT and OT relationship struggles and silos? Often OT doesn't want to work with cyber and IT because they've been burned. You got a quick 60-second take on that?
Yeah. So I use the phrase "embrace being a tourist," right? I think one of the hardest. I think the way cyber people approach problems sometimes is we like to be the smartest people in the room, and we like to tell people we're the smartest people in the room. And when you get out to these kind of OT spaces, really what you're going into are little kingdoms. And they take a lot of pride in the capability that they have. They have a lot of pride in their uptime and operations. And so when you show up, I mean, it's really just about being respectful and listening, and and doing things that show it's not about you, it's about being a partner. We joke about the donuts, but that kind of stuff matters. You show up with donuts, you show up, we bring swag, so we get stickers and all sorts of stuff from our vendors, and we take them out there with us. And so you'll just be out there, and guys out, mechanics will be rocking all sorts of crazy cybersecurity vendor stickers on their helmets and stuff. And it's just kind of cool to see. It's one last thing. It's never a big thing. It's just little things. So little things that we do is don't bring donuts to the control room because they don't like to get their hands sticky. Because if they eat a donut, then they got to go wash their hands and stuff. So we bring them candy. And you don't know how good you make someone feel when you remember the type of candy that they like. You bring that special candy just for them. So we had this experience at one of our facilities. We brought some candy out. That person was, just happy to see us. No one's ever happy to see cybersecurity, but these folks are happy to see us. And then when they see us, they start giving us all sorts of interesting, hey, did you know about this? Did you know about that?
Right.
Can you look into this problem for me? And so we're like, oh my God, look at that intel. It's just fantastic. And then
in that moment, you've gotten intel that nobody's squeezed out because nobody's actually just made the effort, to go out there. That's what I see more often, especially with manufacturing clients. Less so with utilities like yourself, because you're kind of at the more leading edge and you kind of have to be because of the regulations. But on manufacturing, when you ask a lot of IT execs, when's the last time one of their staff visited one of the manufacturing plants that they keep espousing has security anomalies, the quiet sets across the room like you can't imagine. You're like, well, first you got to get out there. And then second, you have to do what you're saying, which is, hey, bring something, bring them some food, bring pizza in, ask them some questions, and don't come barging in like, well, I know you've been operating this machine for 25 years, but I've really got the answers. It's the basic stuff we know, but it's amazing how often it doesn't, to your point, get actually practiced when you go into those environments.
Yep. Yeah, Chris, I think you're probably one of the first people in history to say utilities are on the leading edge, but
I like to, you are compared to, I'm picturing one of the clients I call, which is a paper manufacturing plant. You are so far ahead of it. They're like, no, we don't go to that plant deep in Mississippi. I'm like, what do you mean you don't go to the plant? They're like, yeah, nobody's gone there except the workers. I'm like, well, maybe that's where we should start, right? So
it's a great opportunity, that's for sure.
Exactly. Ian, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Great perspective. Super cool stuff. Thank you.